Good evening, everybody, and welcome. We are so very happy to have you all here tonight, joining us for Unprecedented. I would like to take a moment very quickly to let you know that we have Spanish translation available this evening. And so if you just look down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can see the interpretation button. If your preference is to listen to our conversation and join us in Spanish, please select Spanish as your language and you'll be able to access live Spanish interpretation.
Buenas tardes todos. Solo para dejarlos saber que tenemos traducción para esta presentación. Entonces solo tienen que presionar o empujar abajo donde dice inglés o español y se cambia inmediatamente a español para ustedes.
All right. Well, I am Sarah Poulain, and I am the Executive Director for Family Connections. If you are new to our organization, Family Connections is a family learning community focused on parents and children together, building deep connections and learning side by side. We do this through parent participation, early learning, along with school-aged workshops and connections throughout the year. And we are very excited for the upcoming year, and we are very excited to have you here tonight. Thank you again for joining us. And this roundtable tonight will include our own in-house mental health clinician, Stephanie Loera, and Gloria Moskowitz-Sweet, who's a school social worker and developer of social emotional learning curriculum. And they will be discussing with me families' needs during this pandemic, and most importantly, during our emergence into the new normal. I just want to take a moment to introduce both Stephanie and Gloria. Stephanie joined us at Family Connections in late 2019 as our own in-house bilingual clinician. She holds bachelor's degrees from UC Berkeley in peace and conflict studies, Spanish and Portuguese, and a master's in social work from the University of Southern California. Stephanie has worked with families by providing individual and family services through various models, such as trauma-informed liberation and strength-based approaches. Also a Pilates instructor, Stephanie is passionate about families and children being aware of their mind and body connections. Gloria is a licensed social worker and co-founder of My Digital Tattoo, and also co-author of It Rained Warm Bread, a book about her father's Holocaust experience. Winner of Parents' Choice Magazine Gold Award and Kirkus Best Book of 2019. Gloria has been a program developer, school social work educator, practitioner, and professional presenter with over 30 years of experience. She's a lecturer at San Jose State University School of Social Work and has been doing that for more than 20 years. She has also been involved in the creation of comprehensive school-based mental wellness programs, bullying prevention programs, teacher in-services, and professional workshops. Welcome, Stephanie and Gloria.
Thank you.
Well, given that we only have so much time tonight, I'd like to go ahead and move right into our questions. My first question is for Stephanie. Stephanie, you've been working with our families all year long through a very hard year. How are our families doing? And can you bring us into some of the challenges they've faced?
Yeah. I promise this will be the only long one, because I do want to set it up so that everything else can sort of make sense and to see how magnified it can be during this last year. So I have them all bullet pointed in my head. I'm going to try and go through them. So first would be housing. A lot of the times, not everyone, of course, but many of our families live in what is called double up situations. I'm not sure if you know what that is. I'll explain it really briefly. It's basically if one is living in a home with more people than that it was designed. So living with multiple families, or even within just one family, but maybe 4 siblings, 2 siblings, and the parents within one room, or 1 bedroom, 1 studio, whatever that may be the case. And that's actually considered homeless if you were to be looking at the definition of the McKinley-Vento Act. So we have that. And if you think about that, when we think about housing, then if someone tries to apply for, let's say, help that the county is offering, that the state is offering, sometimes their names is not on the lease. Sometimes they don't have a contract. Sometimes those services can't even be accessed. Add on top of that, the public charge, which again is no longer in place. But if prior to the public charge, there was already 1 in 5 immigrant communities not wanting to access public benefits at all. I can't imagine what it's like after having to deal with public charge, and now knowing that it's gone, but still having that doubt is always in the back of everyone's minds. So if you think about that, there might not even be a question to even go ask for help. And then one last thing too, if you think about financially, CalFresh, those numbers, or food stamps, whatever term you think it is today it's actually CalFresh for California. Those numbers are based on federal numbers, and the Bay Area, we all know, is really expensive. Families are probably making a lot more, but a lot of the times, both anecdotally and research-based, the families are just at the poverty line, so they don't have healthcare, they don't have insurance just because they're at the line, or they make too much, but they live in the Bay Area. So they're, one, not accessing food, but also medical benefits are just not going to be there. I had one more number, sorry, I got really excited about the numbers. In immigrant and low-income household communities, these are numbers also based in Massachusetts, but I imagine they can be applied here as well. And these are just the initial poll and research findings from COVID. Specifically, 76% of these specific households have at least one job loss. So add that to housing, to food insecurity, to job loss, to financial instability even before COVID, and impacted throughout this time as well. And wait, one more thing, sorry. If you think about these double up too for schools and children, there are multiple kids in one room trying to do their homework, trying to be at school. All of that combined is just really difficult.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And those data points are so important. I think we don't always hear them, and we're not always holding them front of mind. So we appreciate you bringing those to the table. Gloria, my next question is for you. You work with children of all ages, some older than those we serve, right? And I'm wondering if you could bring us into what you're hearing from the young people that you've connected with about their.
Absolutely. First, I just want to say, Stephanie, I echo everything you just said. I mean, we are seeing what you're seeing, and with an older age range of students. At my digital tattoo, we listen really carefully to the voices of young people. It's really the premise and the charge of our work. So we want to work with kids and listen to their voices. And in this period of time, it was all done virtually. And they taught us an incredible amount. They showed us through behavior, through in-class workshops, through discussion groups, that with learning disabilities, with ADHD, with struggles with anxiety and depression, that they were really struggling tremendously during this time. For kids that didn't have access, and Stephanie, you talked about this, to consistent places to do their work, or families that were really struggling with finance, with loss of jobs, with loss of family members. The level of anxiety and depression was astronomical for these kids, and it impacted them all the way through. And it will continue to impact them. And that's something that, as a clinical social worker, I'm paying really close attention to. But I also saw this tenacity and ability to move forward that was mind-boggling at times for me. And it gave us tremendous hope when we worked with our kids in classroom settings, in advisory groups, and on a one-on-one as well. We saw kids that let us know that they were using technology and social media in ways to connect and collaborate and to stay focused on each other and to play in a way that we were really knowing that was being lost during this pandemic. They were finding their way, and it was an amazing thing to see. And we were reassuring many families that during this time, they needed that ability to connect more than anything. They taught us that on Discord, which is an app for gamers, that all kids were going on that as a way of finding community. That initially they were going on apps like House Party, literally to have a house party because we couldn't have a house party, right? And they wanted to know that there was still a chance to connect and have fun. They were having Netflix watch parties with each other. They continue to defy the laws of gravity. As things got scarier and more concerning, they found their way. And, you know, I honestly learned so much by watching them. At the beginning of March, it was all novel, right? I mean, things just shut down and nobody really knew what that meant. So initially it felt like, okay, like this is interesting, you know, this could be kind of even fun. And then it went on, and then it went on, and it went on. And so we began to see what was novel begin to be really concerning and scary for them. As summer went on, depression hit. The California fires, the fires that we experienced had tremendous impact on their mental well-being, as well as their physical well-being. As school started again, or was supposed to start and didn't, we really saw many of our kids letting us know that they were beginning to feel hopeless. And still, they continued connecting with each other and collaborating and finding ways to reinvent how they saw themselves and each other as groups. There were a couple apps that were really exciting for us to watch, and one of them was TikTok. On TikTok, they found their voices. TikTok just grew enormously during the pandemic, and I can see why. And we asked kids to take us into that, show us what you're doing. And they showed us not only were they creative on there, they were learning new skills and they were learning things that they, you know, had never done before. They were also finding their voice, and they were fighting back against racism, against toxicity, against hate. They were creating the most amazing videos and empowering each other in ways that empowered the adults that, you know, they were allowing in their lives. So we saw the challenges, and we also saw this tenacity that just was really special to watch.
Incredible, Gloria. Thank you for sharing that. I think the key pieces around community, around tenacity, right, and around this fortitude, you know, in our families and in our children to just continue in the face of things that are incredibly daunting. Is really inspiring. And I used the word hope earlier, and I think there's that piece, particularly for those of us who are supporting, you know, to be the holders of the hope and be able to kind of continue to hold that space as everyone navigates this really incredibly challenging territory. So thank you for that. Okay, well, my next question is back to Stephanie. I have heard from all of our staff here at Family Connections just how inspired they have been by our lion-hearted families and our kids. How have our families and our kids inspired you?
I'm going to go into a little bit of another definition just because it's a title. Resilience, this word resilience, I'm sure all three of us even have similar but different definitions of what resiliency means to us. For me, resilience is not, it's something that we potentiate, something that we grow. It's never a fixed characteristic. Yeah. And a lot of the times our culture makes it so that makes it sound so that we have to be stoic in the face of adversity, of challenges. And in the last year, again, we faced so much, and it's just important to remember. I think in Gloria talking about the apps, the connections, the community, that is the way in which our families have created resiliency and established and continue to grow their own resiliency. So I just wanted to preface it with that. It's really a lifelong practice that I feel like families are continuing to grow. And some of the specific anecdotes that really stand out for me, some are a lot bigger, some are a lot smaller. One, I guess, is I learned from some of my teenagers, as Gloria was just saying, actually, I am working with parents and kids at this time. And she was just sharing that she's been connected to her friends this entire time. They're not seeing each other for an entire year, but they feel like they're more connected than ever. And I think her resilience in keeping those close friendships and growing alongside with them, especially with the goals that we're working on together, she was able to continue to do that throughout our time. A different family who prior to COVID actually didn't have any social supports. She didn't have any family. She didn't have any friends really. And that was one of our her personal goals, is to have a friend and to actually be able to reach out to someone when she is needing help. So that one was something that was really special to me, when she was able to make that connection and then actually reach out when she needed to. When families engage with each other outside of the school, when someone offers to babysit, when someone offers to just go outside to see each other, just to know that they are there, that was really special. Families who would send me a picture of a flower because they said it meant something to them and it really brightened up their day. And when they would send it to me and say, I know you would really enjoy this.
That's awesome.
That was really special. And then one last thing, which I actually just got today, a family sent me a video of her kiddo who initiated breathing exercises on his own. And that was really special to me too.
That's amazing. I love that. And there's just this two things that really stood out to me when you were talking about resilience is something we grow, and this idea that strength is not equal to stoicism, right? That we can be strong and vulnerable, resilient and scared, and that these are all processes that we navigate. And the same being said for the families who are in our community. And I really love that. And then both you and Gloria really underscoring this piece around the importance of connection and community. We don't do so well by ourselves. And so finding ways to link and to have a community of support is so critically important, particularly, I mean, it's important all the time. And just given our current circumstances, even more so. And I think continuing to be so as we move out into a different, I'll call it a different level. I won't say out of this pandemic, but as we move to a different level within this pandemic, and really beginning to assess what is our new normal and how do we navigate our world. So I just really appreciate both of you bringing kind of those strengths to the forefront. So I will continue on and just ask Gloria, we've been really fortunate as an organization because through your work at My Digital Tattoo, you've actually worked with our young scholar students. I'd love it if you could share a little bit about what that was like and what you learned from them during the programs you hosted.
Absolutely. It was wonderful working with your young scholars. We had an opportunity in February to work with your 3rd and 4th grade students on friendship. So we really look at what it means to be a good friend, both online and offline. And we start with by friendship, offline, and what makes it more complicated online, where you can't see someone's face at times, or you can't read body language, and what are some of the issues that can get in the way. And that's just such a fun discussion with them. And then we talked about empathy with this group as well, what it means to step into someone else's shoes and also to stand up for others. And we also presented to your 5th through 7th grade students. And in that presentation, we talked about privacy and digital reputation. Who do you want to be known for? How do you want the world to see you? And this is an opportunity right now to really think about what you put out there. What do you want to keep private? What is public? What is sharing by default? And that happens a lot when you are in a Zoom classroom where what's behind you is being seen by everybody, and perhaps you're being judged on something that you're not even aware of. So it was a really interesting discussion. We were struck by the engagement of your students. We were struck by your young scholars leaning in and not just wanting to be a part of the discussion, but they also wanted to play. And that's something that we've learned a lot from kids, particularly during the pandemic. It's like they're saying to us, don't take my play away. Don't take my chance to engage with you away. And our educators are very playful and just enjoyed that contact with them. One of our educators talked about how wonderful it was at the end of the presentation to get this flurry of thank yous and welcomes, and that was so great. And but then they stayed on after, and that's always a really great sign. And many of our kids call it recess. They kind of stay on after to have recess with adults, and adults that are interested in talking with them about their digital lives, which is to them like amazing. And they can't wait to talk about it. So they stayed on and they wanted to talk about gaming and to share what they loved about being online and connecting with their friends. So working with your kiddos was wonderful. And I also have to add that we also had the pleasure of working with your parent community. And it was one of the most, and that happened a month later, that was in March. And that was one of the most engaged parent presentations that we have had throughout this period of time. Parents stayed on 45 minutes after the presentation was over. The presentation had ended, but they wanted to continue the discussion, and they had questions and scenarios and stories they wanted to share. They wanted to talk about gaming, and they wanted to talk about, their concerns, for example, on Fortnite and a game that was really big at that time, Among Us, not quite as big now, but still there. And their questions were things like, is my child going to become violent if they play this game? Because is it violent? And they were just self-disclosing and vulnerable and supportive of each other, and wanted resources and wanted information. It was amazing. It was really amazing. And it speaks to the work you're doing. It speaks to what we learned from your community, that they felt safe enough to engage with each other in this community. And there was well over 40, and with us. So it was such a pleasure working with your parent community. One of our educators said the sense they got afterwards was your parents were leaning in and saying, tell me more. And that was just really exciting for us. So we had a wonderful chance getting to know your children and your parents.
Phenomenal, thank you. And we are so blessed, and it is such a special community and such a group that we have the great pleasure of supporting and actually being led by. Our families tell us where we need to go. And I think that is incredibly, we're lucky
Yes.
to have that engagement. And we're grateful to have, wonderful resources to come in and lean in into those conversations. We appreciate that. I was at the parent workshop and I really, really enjoyed it. I do have another question for you, Gloria. I'm also wondering, how have you seen this last year really impact our young people, particularly as you'd mentioned earlier, kind of as we're heading, like there was the initial time and then things just kept going, right? And now we're heading in another direction. And I'm wondering kind of what you've seen as the impacts on our young people, in particular, those from our more under-resourced families.
I'm so glad you're asking this question. Everybody has been impacted. There is, one of the things I realize as I look at this, and as a social worker, I want to know more. It's like, I'm with you, like with your parents, tell me more. When I meet with parents and kids and educators, everybody has a story. Everyone has had something that has happened, but not to the degree that we see in underserved, under-resourced communities. What we have seen in those communities are children who are dealing with parents who are frontline workers and watching the anxiety on their parents' faces as they step out the door, worried about their own health and about what it means to bring something back to their children. We see family members who have lost their jobs and have lost financial footing and are worried about eviction. And kids are so tuned in to their parents. Even if a family is working so hard to kind of prevent their child from taking that in, their child is taking it in just through osmosis. They're just leaning into and looking at what's going on. Many of our kids were getting school lunches or breakfast and had educators that were really focused on them. And literally overnight, they lost that safety net. And their parents lost that safety net. Their communities lost that safety net. And so there was a tremendous sense of, how do we do this? And hopefully it's not going to last that long, but it kept going on and on and on and on. With these kids, we saw increased anxiety. We saw sleep disturbance. We saw depression. But again, I keep going back to that tenacity and that desire to connect and to find a way. And I see that in your families. We really saw it in that parented with your families, and we see it with the kids. My hope, and I'll talk about this a little more when we talk about reentry, is that our educators and our school communities allow all of our kids, particularly our hardest hit kids, to share their stories. This was not a lost year. This was a year like none other. And this is a year that needs to be talked about and needs to be processed and needs to be told. And my concern as an educator is going back to business as usual and an assumption that we have to catch kids up. And I feel so strongly that that's not our charge right now. Our charge is to be there with them and to stand by them and to do some imperative work and support them and in this tenacity and resiliency that we see them having, and to not take that away from them. So that's really what I've seen. Honestly, I've been amazed as I always have been by kids. I always feel hopeful after leaving a group of kids. And I know, Sarah, I did a intervention with a group of underserved communities in LA Unified School District, and it was a large group of middle school students, and they taught me so much. But I left those kids thinking, in spite of all the odds, I mean, these kids were just showing us how able they were with support to do incredibly well.
Thank you so much. Stephanie, did you want to lean in there?
I just want to add in another data point that in different states that we're already seeing families of low income backgrounds that they are self-evicting at this point. So I'm so glad California has extended, but I do, that is also a worry that's in the background.
Yep.
It just layers in, right? Those layers of anxiety and worry. Thank you for adding that. So my next question, actually, Stephanie, is for you. I'm really curious how our teachers at Family Connections and our frontline staff, actually all of our team, how you're seeing them supporting and resourcing our families. And why do you think that is so vital, that work, our work is so vital right now?
Well, I've been at a handful of nonprofits in the Bay Area at this point, and I've been able to see the differences, and I've been able to see how special Family Connections really is. Something that is one of the most special things to me is that our team meet individually with each preschool teacher. So it's the teacher, it's myself, it's the home visitor, and we have an outside consultant as well who join those meetings. And I think those meetings really allow us to catch up on all of our families, or if there is any concern, or if someone just says, hey, can you check in on this family? Or, hey, I heard from this family, haven't heard from them in a while, or whatever the case may be. That is a point not only for referrals, but it's also just something that it's not just me holding someone, it's everyone together. I think that makes it really impactful because the families also know that it's not just one person who's keeping them in mind. It's all of us who have them in our hearts. So those meetings have been incredibly helpful. Something else I've noticed is that staff in general has been a lot more flexible in the way that we communicate with families. There's message boards, there's different, with the learning applications that we've had to get this year. If a phone call doesn't work, texting is fine. Things like that, they really matter. They're so small and maybe minute, but they go a long way to keep us in constant contact with families. And I really appreciate that. And it's not just myself, it's everyone across the board. With families, even up to the programmatic staff. Maybe they're not interacting with the families as much, but they actually still are, because families still know who they are. Families still see them at the food drive, whatever the case may be. Families are always in contact with almost every level of our staff at this point, which I also think is really special. But again, I'm biased. Something else, I guess a specific detail as well, if families go to a teacher with a concern or something, and they don't want the teacher to share. I always thought it was so special. The teachers don't share. The teachers keep that with them until the family is ready to share. That's something that I've noticed. And another example with the teacher, if there's a job and the teacher happens to hear about it, that teacher will then tell someone who she knows who's in her class, oh, so-and-so has a job, maybe your husband can go apply. Something like that is so, you don't see that everywhere. I don't know, for me, maybe you do, maybe you don't. I haven't before. And even if that person had already found a job at that point, then the family themselves will go to a friend, a family, or even another family within the program saying, this is available to you if you need this. So I think more than anything, it's collective care that Family Connections really offers.
I just want to add to that, Stephanie, because I'm struck by that also in the work that you do and the work that you all do. This recognition that you have to surround a child by all the stakeholders in their lives, and you have to strengthen every part of it to strengthen the child. Most places don't get that, and I've been in this field for a very long time. And so, Stephanie, I know you said you're biased, but you're right. I mean, the ability to recognize what it means to hold everybody up. It's not just the child, the community, the family, the child, the educators, because when they're strong, the child can sustain. And that's what I see you doing and really appreciate.
Thank you so much, Gloria, for adding to that. And Stephanie, yeah, I'm with you. I think, again, it's these themes. Like, I love like these threads, like through this whole conversation, we're again talking about community, connection, support, that we're all in this together, that there's no, that we actually cannot, it is this interconnectedness that makes us all stronger and increases our capacity for support, for strength, and to move through these really challenging times. So I really appreciate you bringing those pieces forward for sure. So amazingly, we're heading toward the last question I have for both of you, but we are getting ready. We are gearing up for questions from our audience as well. But I'd love for each of you to share, and you can Rochambeau or jump in, who wants to go first, but what are some strategies that you feel could help families support their children and other members of their community at this time? Who'd like to lean in?
I'd love you to start, Stephanie.
I don't know. There's so much. I'm just going to echo things that we've already sort of talked about. Community, remembering that we don't always have to be strong. I think that's one of the most important ones. Getting outside. We're doing nature walks this summer. I just think there's something special about getting outside of your home. That's been really helpful for a lot of families this year. And still continues to be, and I wanted to bring that to the forefront. And again, just this collectiveness that already exists within us, that we already have, and just remembering that that's always there, whether that's with our families, our friends, or even nature.
I love that. I echo that, and I also want to add, I always say to parents, you're the expert on your child. You know your child. Trust your gut, trust your intuition. As we begin to re-enter and go back to school, we know that our children that have a hard time with change, or our kids that are triggered more easily, the patience that we're going to need to really support them in this process of re-entry, which is going to be really big, is important. But I want parents to trust that they have the answers, because I really believe that nobody knows a child like a family does. I also want to talk about we've all been through trauma. I mean, this has been an unbelievable experience, and your title says it all. It's unprecedented, and in many ways, to me, it's a paradigm shift in how we see our own personal safety now. The fact that we see ourselves in this global world. We have never lived through a pandemic before. I mean, there are these big shifts in how we see ourselves in the world. And I think we have to really allow ourselves to just accept the fact that this is not easy, and to be patient. I've talked to many parents that, you know, are worried, have I done enough? Am I doing a good enough job? Am I monitoring gaming enough? And I want to say to parents, it's okay right now. You know, lighten up on yourself, particularly take time to have fun with your kids outside without a device. I want them outdoors. I've talked to a lot of kids who are just itching to get outside. But I also want to say to parents, this is a golden opportunity to learn about what your kids are doing online without fear, but to lean into it as well, and to find out, for example, in our middle schoolers, what is it about TikTok that is so exciting? And take me into that Minecraft game, because maybe we can do this together. But to find community in all the ways we can find it, and to find ways of having fun with each other, which I think we really, really need.
Gloria, you reminded me of something, that it's okay that they're not doing 100% at school. It's okay to get a B. It's okay to even get a C. That those things are okay this year, coming year.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And the other thing I want to add too is sometimes just listening right now. I mean, as kids have stories to tell, as they're getting back to school, as they're trying to figure out what it's going to look like. We want to fix it as parents. We want to somehow make them feel, make it better, get them back on track. And maybe right now it's okay to just be with our kids and recognize that this has been a trauma, and there's still so much that's unknown, and there's still so much that we don't know. So I just want parents to be supportive of each other, and I see that in your community. I want parents to take care of each other. I want families to come together. I want communities to just help each other through this, and the best way to do this is collectively, and talking it out is one of the best ways that I've seen.
Thank you both. Those are incredibly helpful strategies and thoughts, and I do agree that both finding opportunities, I think, for ourselves and for our children to just relax, to take some of that anxiety and stress outside of our bodies. And we can do that by moving, right? And being in safe places. Like outside is such a wonderful and one of the safer places we can be. And then this piece, and Gloria, you also mentioned this earlier, but the kind of putting words to it, right? The speaking about and of where we are, of the experience of being in this pandemic, of how it has been, and potentially even our hopes and our worries as we move forward, that putting breath underneath those words is such a critical piece of regulating, right? And becoming more grounded in ourselves and in the way in which we move in the world. And right now, moving in the world feels a bit treacherous. Thank you both for those pieces. So we've gotten some questions. The first one's for me, so I'm gonna answer that, and then we'll move through some additional questions for both you, Gloria, and Stephanie. So one of the questions that was just asked is, what are some of the challenges that FC faces in resourcing families during this time? And I'll answer that a bit, and then Stephanie, I'd love to hear a bit from you, because it was quite a logistical feat to ensure we stayed connected this year. So what I'd say is one of the biggest pieces is really ensuring that we are continuing to hold our community, to stay connected, to, I wouldn't call it a challenge, but I think one of the things we've had the opportunity to do is to identify ways in which we can grow our flexibility in how we reach out to and engage with our families, and how we provide opportunities for them. I think potentially one of the harder things is that for the staff to lean in to this increased level of communication and connection while we couldn't be in person. So there's this tremendous shift from who we have been, which is a really in-person, really engaged organization, to navigating the space in between, being with one another at site and being with one another electronically. I think has been that how do we reassure folks right? And how do we really ensure that everyone knows that we're here for them, and the burden that that places on staff. And I don't mean like it's hard work to do in the sense of everybody is all in, everybody is 110% committed. And I think we all carry in our hearts every single person we touch in our community. And so really, really ensuring that we have been doing our best and giving our best efforts and providing as much as we possibly can. I think, we sit in an interesting space. So one of the other, I think, challenges that we had this year in ensuring our families were resourced was that some of our funders, we have incredible and generous funders, and some of our funders who've historically funded us were really focused on those much needed core and concrete supports of providing PPE, ensuring testing, at this point, ensuring vaccination and pieces like that. And so a lot of that funding that we would get for kind of what we look at as like supporting the long-term benefits, right? Supporting families through a longer period of time for now, but also into the future. Some of that was shifted. We're really, really fortunate because we have incredible individual donors who have leaned in and stepped up in incredible ways this year. And it's our hope that as we elevate this conversation, Gloria and Stephanie, you both kind of talked about it, that we're not done here, right? That the impacts of this pandemic, even as we may even as our own physical health may become less in jeopardy, that our mental and social emotional well-being continues to be an area where we need to focus. And so I think for us as an organization, we really want to call attention to that and call our funders attention to that, and really resource our teams as much as possible to navigate those pieces in support of our families and our community. This is a really long-winded answer to that question. Stephanie, do you have anything to add to that?
Just one more thing. A need, again, because we know that this is going to continue to be an issue, and maybe things are going to come up that haven't come up just yet. Mental health is going to be really important. It has been incredibly important this last year. I am one person. We do have a few interns now, but they can't take so many. And a lot of our families, we have the trauma from last year, but in the majority of our families, their ACEs scores are some of the highest that I've ever worked with.
Can you explain what ACEs are really quickly for folks who might not know?
ACEs is just the, it's, how do I explain it more easily? It's a list of questions that sort of goes into different traumatic events that one may have gone through in their life. And the higher that they are, sort of has shown to have specific detrimental effects on one's health outcomes, both physical and emotional in the long term. But yes, we have a lot of families who do have high ACEs. Interns are great, they are supervised, but again, there is always a need, and there will continue to be a need for this, especially if we don't want to have these wait lists.
Absolutely, thank you for bringing that in. So I do have a question for you, Steph, an audience member wanted to hear more about, like you mentioned, breathing techniques and things earlier with young people. And the question was really about, do we or how do we incorporate mindfulness at Family Connections?
Okay. I feel like we incorporate it a lot at this point. I know that I specifically gave a training for the teachers, if I'm remembering. I think it was more specifically on trauma, but I know I also went into how mindfulness can help play a role in this. I know that one-on-one, I do a lot of mindfulness-based work with families, again, always keeping in account the oppression that may lay behind that. So bringing that in addition to the mindfulness, has been very helpful. And I know that even during staff meetings, someone is always in charge of having a mindfulness moment or creating a moment for us within each other. And again, as a Pilates instructor, I have like the leeway to bring that into my sessions individually. I have that to bring in when I talk to an intern. So it's, for me, it's always at the forefront.
Thank you. Thank you. Gloria, the next question is actually for you. From an external perspective, can you speak a bit, you already have a little bit, but a bit more to the importance of Family Connections work to support whole family and community wellness?
Oh, absolutely. In my field as a clinical social worker and primarily as a school social worker, I've learned that working systemically is the only way we can really support our communities and our families. And I was trained in initially in just child therapy, and recognized early on in my training that how can you just impact one part of this big community without really shoring up everything else. And so when I got to know your work, Sarah, I was intrigued immediately by the fact that you just got that, that you did it, and it was such an important part of your work. I've had a chance to work with you, Sarah, as in part of my community advisory board, but also before that, we did a piece of work together. And you early on talked about just the importance of bringing in community and family, educators, to support and shore up children. You kind of pushed back at people that just talked about supporting the child. And I always felt like we were speaking the same language. That's essential to me. And Stephanie, when you talk to hear you saying, it might be different. I don't know if it's out there, but it's certainly here. It's certainly here. And it isn't in a lot of places, because I don't know if we pay attention to the systemic piece, to the reality that we have to shore up everything if we want to support the child. So I can speak to that because I've seen it. I've heard it from you, Sarah. We've talked about it together, but most importantly, I saw it in your children and I saw it in your parents. And when we did our work with your child community, and I have to say, particularly your parent community, and their level of engagement and their desire to get involved and to keep learning, that just told me everything.
Thank you. Well, our families teach us. They show us the way, 110%. And I am a systems person in this organization. I mean, long before me. I've only been here for 4 years, and we're heading toward 28. I think it has just been an integral part of who we are to engage with the whole community, the whole system, and look at things from, because nobody is an island, and we certainly cannot do any of this alone. And so I think that's a huge part of things. So thank you for that perspective. So another question that has come that is for me. I like this part. I get to answer questions. It makes me feel like a panelist. So the question is, Family Connections has clearly stepped up to support families in a really important way. Do you have the resources and support you need to continue your incredible work? And then the follow-up is, if not, how can we as your community help? Whew, this is my favorite question. What I will say is this: we have been here for 28 years, and it is our hope and our intention that we will continue to be here and support and provide space for our families to grow and to thrive. That said, we have found ways to get the resources we need. I talked about our incredibly strong donor base and really supportive funders. And we are a small but growing, ever growing nonprofit. We started with 2 people and 5 families, and we now have 13 staff and serve over 300 individual family members every year. And we're still going, and the need doesn't go away. And so I think for us, resources means infrastructure, resources means new funding, growing funding. It means being able to increase our visibility in our communities, and for people to know about us and to know this very unique thing we do. As I've had the pleasure of talking with folks in Santa Clara County a lot over this past year, and our brand of work is not something that exists in other places. And I would love if it did. We would love. It's not just me. And so I think that we always need resources and support from in multiple ways. So obviously there's the funding pieces, and then there's this invaluable support that we get from volunteers who come and help us maintain our sites. Like this year, during the pandemic, we had groups from Young Men's Service League and other incredible groups doing things like making Play-Doh for our kiddos that we could distribute, and they would do that. It was, and I'm always looking around for Lorena, our program director, because I'm always in a room with her, hearing amazing things about the programs. But you know, this was being like done, you know, every couple of weeks for our families. We have connected with food and gardening resources, and our gardens are incredible and flourishing and growing fresh food, and that our families help us cultivate and grow and can access. And so those volunteer resources as well, harder during a pandemic, but as we move toward reopening, that we want people back at the sites. We want folks to engage even remotely in connecting with you know, our amazing families, reading and doing activities and just engaging with us in that way. And I already said, like, I could go on and on, but just for people to really know who we are, understand what we do, to be curious, to engage, and to let other people know that we're here and how unique this incredible work is, and how amazing, amazingly strong and unique this community is of our families and our staff, our team. So that's my 25 cents on that. And I am also acknowledging that I cannot believe where the time has gone. And so we're ready to close out. Gloria, Stephanie, I want to thank you so much for your time, for your insights, and for engaging in this conversation. To everyone who is attending tonight, thank you for, again, taking the time. I know we have families on with us. We have board members, staff, donors, stakeholders, the whole ball of wax, other community members, and we just appreciate you all so much. And we look forward to finding more opportunities to come together in conversation and in connection. So thank you all, and have a fantastic night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.